Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ken.
Good evening, Ken.
It's good to see everybody. It's been a couple, 3 weeks. We had a wonderful foot washing, Lord's Supper with the brethren down in Southern Ohio, and then last week we were in Dalton, Georgia, with the brethren and enjoying the last day of unleavened bread. So we're glad to be back, and we hope everyone else had a wonderful spring holy days and. Want to welcome everyone to episode 382, Why Third Temple Speculation is Vital for Christians and Jews. Dr. Ricks, if you'd start us out that.
Okay. This is from someone in Texas called Ramblings of a Retired Mind. A Retired Mind. The man said, I spent a fortune on deodorant before I realized that people didn't like me anyway. Okay. I was thinking that women should put pictures of their missing husbands on beer cans. I was thinking about old age and decided I'd make an old age exercise video, and I would call it Pumping Rust.
I get it.
And this is one that I like and some don't like it. When people come to visit you and they see you have a litter box, they say, "Oh, you must have a cat." Just once I want to say, "No, that's for the company."
The company you don't want to get to stay too long.
Now, this last one maybe is not as risky as the other jokes, a little more sober, but I like it anyway. This is from a famous comedian said this. I was thinking about how people read the Bible a whole lot more as they get older and older. Then it dawned on me, they're cramming for their final exam.
I get it.
Okay. This is a sermon about speculation. I just want to say something up front. You realize that if two people are philosophizing and speculating, or iron sharpening iron, neither one is making any specific statement of absolute truth, because I think it's arrogant. I think we said that in an earlier podcast, maybe a couple months ago, to think that you know the future, unless you're actually a prophet. And don't worry about it. Anybody who comes to you and says they're a prophet, usually they're Looney Tunes, but we don't know the future. But there's value in speculating. I'm going to give you a military example. By the way, the military is supposed to do this too. It surprised some politicians back many years ago. They're supposed to have various scenarios for if America gets in war in certain situations, what we probably ought to do and have plans for and be prepared for. Let's say if you're on a watchtower in a fortified city, and you can be invaded three different ways: amphibious landing, airborne assault, or land assault coming in behind you, and you're on a beach on the ocean. Well, wouldn't it be wise you to send in spies, agents, and all those aerial drone things and aerial reconnaissance to watch what's going on and then speculate if they're going to come at us, they're going to come amphibious. No, it looks like more they're going to go the land route. It would be smart to keep track on it so that you don't get totally caught off guard.
Yes.
I think that's how we should looking at Bible prophecy. I'm not saying, obviously, as we get closer and closer and God brings the two witnesses, more details will be there, and whatever God's going to do, we'll see more of it clearly. But I think even this far away, it's not wrong to look at the world and think about it. Any comments, Ken?
Yeah, no, this speculation is just being a watchman. Um, we know that we're not there yet. The road signs we haven't seen the two witnesses, we haven't seen the temple, and there's quite a few other things we have not seen. But we see the atmosphere being changing to where these things can come about. We don't have a mark, but we have Bitcoin, which is virtual currency, and we have the technology to implement a mark, which would not allow someone to buy and sell unless they have it. So we have that. So we can see how that goes in. We can see how mass fear is established by watching the masking and the virus that's going around, and how they can scare people, even though nobody's starving to death, and nobody's you don't see massive amounts of ambulances hauling people to the hospital, and you're not seeing overwhelmed um, funeral homes, but people are still so afraid they'll put this mask on and give up their rights. So you can see how the atmosphere is getting us to the point where people accept things, and we can get to the point where these signs.
It's sort of like during the American Revolution, one if by land, two if by sea. They weren't sure what British would do, but they were watching. One if by land, two if by sea. So we're watching. So don't feel bad as we watch. If things don't come out exactly like we think, I think it's still valuable to watch.
Yes.
We'll learn more and more.
Watching is valuable.
And we can fight off some level of apathy too. There's some people that are totally clueless about what's going on in the world.
Willfully ignorant. They're more concerned with gay rights and allowing foreigners into the country and on and on and on. So when Obama was running, I said to this girl, I said, he's a Marxist. And she says, I've done my research and all the important things, he's on the right side. And I said, what? And it was gay rights and that kind of stuff. I said, but he's a Marxist. And she said, I don't know what that is. I said, Karl Marx. I've never heard of him, but I know I'm right. They're in their 30s. In their 30s.
Like certain major leaders said, we are trained Marxists. And nobody seemed to be alarmed at that statement. At any rate, the first thing I want to just say is the temple in Jerusalem was important to Jesus Christ. There are people who say, well, Christians shouldn't be thinking about that. That's only Old Testament stuff. Well, one, Old Testament stuff is important to Christians, and that's another topic we'll cover maybe a little more next week. But what I want to say is that Christ was very much concerned about the temple. Twice, he violently cleaned the place out, including during the Passover week before his death, according to the commentaries. Let's go to Mark 11:17, please, Ken.
Then he taught, saying to them, Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you have made it a den of thieves.
When you think about that script, he's obviously quoting an Old Testament scripture, but the point is, it took zeal to go in there, and I assume there was a reasonable number of money changers who were men, and Christ was so give my masculine, tough, and determined that he scared the you know what out of those guys. Turned over their tables, spilling all their money, chasing all the animals that they were selling in there, and he meant it. And the thought occurred to me, the leaders of the Jewish religion, the scribes, the Pharisees, and those other guys, had to be getting a cut. Or they would not have allowed that on the temple grounds. Don't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
And what Christ did had to embarrass them, because a lot of regular Joes would say, somebody should have done that before. Don't you think that's what the people were saying?
They were probably cheering about time somebody done it.
Yeah.
That's
And the honest truth is, one, I think they could have accepted Roman coins in the temple. It wouldn't have offended God. But even if they argue, well, but they got pictures of Caesar or a Roman seal on one side of the coin or the other, even if they make that an issue, which I don't think would matter. But they could have moved that 3 or 4 blocks away from the temple and not charge such high interest rates, which is, it's like being a loan shark. It's another way of robbery. Like you look at the people, they call it around here auto title loans. You realize that they're just cheating poor people?
Yeah, they loan you $1,000 and you pay 30% interest on it.
Or they
and if you don't get it back to them,
That's per month. That's per month. You pay that every month. You're paying 30%, so you have to pay the interest, and then you might knock $5 or $10 off the principal of it.
Wow.
I'm in the wrong business.
I'm telling you.
And you realize that one of the reason that you're short of cash is you have money problems. And a person with money problems is going to have money problems next month and the month after that. Those guys are ripping the public off. Well, that's kind of what these money changers were. Maybe they weren't as bad, but they might have been just as bad.
Or worse.
Another reason I bring that up is to show that Christ cared about the temple, and the temple was there to serve the people, and the temple is important to God. I know we don't think of a building being important to God, but it is important to God. When you read the Bible, New Testament and Old Testament, it's mentioned in both New Testament and Old Testament prominently. So this third temple is not a minor thing, like many people probably think. Let's go to Matthew 24, please, Ken.
and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor shall ever be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened.
Now, there's several things in that scripture. Number one, when you see the abomination of desolation, and a good Jewish person, because that's part of their Hanukkah story, they know all about how the 168 BC, the second temple was desecrated, and Daniel prophesied it many centuries in advance. They know all about it, and that's something they realize. That's a trigger to the end time. The third temple is a trigger to the end time countdown. The second thing is God is going to have to shorten those days, or they poison the world or poison the planet. That is important too, that Jesus Christ's second coming is not just to establish good religion, but to save the world.
Yes.
And I was listening to somebody talking about how they're brainwashing our kids in elementary school. They're telling kids, you can save the world by recycling. You're saving the world. You're saving the planet. Father, I'm all for taking care of nature and conserving things and taking care of forest and treating your lawn and your shrubs nice and recycling garbage and burying garbage in an appropriate way. But we can't save ourselves.
No. No.
Down here, you can recycle if you want to. Some do, some don't. When I went out to California, at McDonald's, you had a trash can for paper, a trash can for styrofoam, a trash can for plastic, a trash can for. They had like 4 trash cans, and their trash pickup is every day of the week. Monday they do paper, on Tuesday they do plastic, on Wednesday they do styrofoam, on Thursday they do, I don't know. Every day of the week they had a truck coming. They tell me
What are they doing with it? Because China quit buying it. China was buying it forever and then selling it back to us in the junk they sell us. but they don't want it anymore. So I wonder.
I don't know. But that was 4 years ago when my brother died. I have no intention of ever going back out to that godforsaken state, California.
I worry they're going to Californicate the whole America. But
I wonder how much they pay for all those pickups.
is it really worth it?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure they're paying a lot of money for it. I mean, I paid for 1 day out of a week, and it's fairly extensive. So they're doing 4 or 5 days a week. Wonder how much they pay for that.
They had armed security everywhere. The restaurants, the gas stations, the 7-Eleven, everywhere you went, there was a guy with standing with a gun.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very aware of that. I train security officers. That's what I did today. So I'm very aware of them and what they do and what they're trained to do and all of that. And in the Florida law, I don't know California, but I did a little bit because my brother did that out there. But at every restaurant, everywhere, there was a guy standing there with a bulletproof vest on and a gun.
That shows you how far liberal societies, it doesn't work. One is Jesus will have to save us. Mankind, it's almost the more worldly and liberal you get in government, the worse the crime gets. You all notice that tendency?
Yeah, because they cannibalize us.
They use it. They use the crime to get their policies in place. They use the criminals to keep power. They use the crime to keep fear amongst the people, so the people think they need them to protect them from the crime. That's why they do it.
They had a guy in California who raped and murdered a girl, and they gave him life plus 10 years. And Newsom just released him.
Well, that life plus 10 years certainly meant a lot, didn't it? See, that's the problem with no death penalty. You never know, right?
I testified on a murder trial where I had found the guy with the body. I had them together. And he pled guilty to second degree, and he's on the street today. And they didn't notify me. They were releasing him. I was the only witness.
By the way, I have a thought. You all probably know this, but the public doesn't. When the communists took over in 1918 and 1919 in Soviet Union, first thing they did was disarm all the peasants and the people. And that was easier in those countries, except for the peasants. They had a lot less guns. When Hitler took over Germany, first thing he did was disarm the people. When they took over in Venezuela, Chavez and whoever his partners are, they disarmed the Venezuelans. And you're going to say they realize that the criminals are not going to give up their guns. That's not their objective. We think all this stuff about guns is for crime. If you outlaw guns, only the outlaws will have guns. I think they know that. But at least in the Soviet Union, they even had food police at one point where people starved. If the public is totally disarmed and only your thugs, I call them thugs, they probably call them other government names, have the guns, it's harder to resist bad government programs. Same in Venezuela. I think that's the real goal of those who want to get rid of guns. Oh, sure, they wouldn't mind crime decreasing here and there a little bit, but I think they know that criminals will get guns. You think if someone's willing to murder you, he's not willing to break gun laws?
Well, I sold both of mine, so I wanted to have some extra cash to buy stuff, so I sold both of them.
Yeah.
So you're unarmed now. You have no guns.
I have a pocket knife, and it's a Swiss pocket knife, so it gets along with everyone.
I think there's some satire here. You people out there.
No, I was going to agree with Dave. That's the same thing here. I think I did the same thing. Took some advice from somebody that helped me out a little bit.
Yeah, same here. Although I haven't got my Swiss knife yet, but I got a Swiss utility thingamajiggy. But I'm going to get the Swiss knife soon, so I can have neutral protection.
Yeah.
Gerber tool will work.
Ken's been hunting with a hammer. So he just
Yeah.
sneaks up on the deer and hits him with the hammer.
Oh, the deer. There's so many deer
with
around here.
bread.
You can just hold out a near a corn and hit them with a ball peen hammer. And
That's it. That's the way you get them. They always ask me how I catch a deer. I said, I don't know. I run pretty fast, I guess.
Right when you get to him, you just kick his hind quarter, it hits the other one, and he trips.
Yeah, but you got to run fast. That's for sure. But they say they only run 100 yards. So if I run fast for 100 yards, we're doing pretty good.
Ken, you saw me in Dalton. I can't. I ain't walking 100 yards.
Yeah, I saw that.
100 yards is not in your.
By the way, if you do get to come to Pentecost in Grand Rivers, it's kind of like a little golfing, boating community. You can ride around on golf carts. People ride around the little town in golf carts.
That's what they do here. Golf carts are a huge business down here.
Oh, good. I think.
Yeah, Florida, Georgia.
Yeah, Peachtree City, Georgia, here, that's all they have on the streets is golf carts.
Myrtle Beach, full.
By the way, we think the speculation of the Third Temple is related to also Jerusalem as a city. When you go into the minor prophets, you'll see it's related. And so one of the goals is rebuilding Jerusalem or making Jerusalem a more Jewish city. And the two topics are related. So just keep that in mind. Let's look at scenario number 1. Is it two strong leaders will achieve at least the starting and hope maybe the finishing of the temple? Let me tell you a story of Harry Truman. My opinion, of course, but I think it's backed up. FDR, he's a power politician, beyond anything we've seen. And I'm not saying he didn't do good things. He won World War II, but the point is, he didn't like, as he got older, his vice president was getting too much attention, and he didn't like overshadowing. So he removed him and put in somebody he thought could never overshadow him, a quiet, and I mean this respectfully, but this is FDR's thinking now, not my thinking, kind of a mousy little guy who was not a dynamic politician. He chose Harry Truman of Missouri. Truman wasn't even in on most of the cabinet meetings. Truman, when he got to be president, knew nothing about the atomic bomb. He was kind of outside, just there. But Truman had been a business partner of some Jewish people in the clothing industry. And in 1947, Truman, against the wishes of at least many nations, recognized Israel as a sovereign state. It was more controversial back then than it might seem. Exactly 70 years, and it was Donald Hanukkah, almost to the day, Donald Trump announced the moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem against all opposition. I think that was a significant, 70 years is one of those prophetic things regarding the rebuilding of Jerusalem, etc. Now, I know that could be pure coincidence, but few things in the Bible are pure coincidence. Did I shock anybody with that statement?
Yeah.
What do you think, Ken?
Nope, it makes sense to me. I never looked into it, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that may be some significance for it. I mean, look how many presidents said they'd do it, and no one had the spine to.
And also, now some of this did start before Trump. I'm going to give him. The Jewish people were heavily criticized for building more and more apartment buildings in what's known as the old city or the original city of Jerusalem. And Trump has been supportive of them in that, and even the Golan Heights, making Jerusalem more and more a Jewish city, at least to some extent. Now, the Arabs probably wouldn't agree, less and less an Islamic Arab city. That is important, I think. But we will see how that works out. Some other countries have moved their embassy to Jerusalem, and if Trump had been reelected, probably more would have followed, I think. Any thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I think you're right. The Jewish people want to be left alone. They want to have their culture, their way of life, and America helps or interferes with that depending on who's in office. I'm hearing that Biden just gave 300 billion or something to the Palestinians. That's just going to be used to hurt Israel. And John Kerry's daughter is married to some Iranian whatever.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and so let's just bring pallets of money over and give it to Iran. And it's money from all, not just American money. It was currency from a lot of other countries, and it was actual pallets of currency. Why? What did that do? Did that stop them from doing terrorist things? Did that make them love us anymore? No. Why? What's behind it? Because it got filtered back to John Kerry somehow. Biden just gave $84 million to some agency, some company or whatever of tax dollars, who then deposited it back in Biden's personal account. You know?
There's a lot of things that it is affecting the Middle East. It's like all the peace that was gained may be squandered. I guess we can't be sure how the future will happen, but here's how it looks to us. Powerful spiritual forces saw Netanyahu, who had been prime minister of Israel longer than any man in their history, and was at least a war hero, depending on who you ask, and very patriotic, and Donald Trump, a very determined man when he got his mind made up. And that coalition, it's like powerful spiritual forces did not like what they were seeing, and they blocked both men. Right now, they've tried to oust Netanyahu 4 times by a parliamentary recall for election. And all 4 times, neither side has been able to gain a coalition. At least as of 2 days ago. I haven't checked yesterday or today. As of 2 days ago, neither the conservatives or the liberals have been able to form a majority. And Israel is in an uncomfortable stalemate, political instability. And it seems like much of the opposition to Netanyahu is personal vendettas. That's how, at least some Israelis who I got their material, that's how they put it, a personal vendetta. And that similarity between the attacks on Netanyahu and Trump, they're so similar that you got to think it's not just a coincidence.
No, it doesn't. It seems like there is one force trying to set us all up so the atmosphere will be more, I don't know, more acceptable for the beast that's coming. Before I go on we go any further, I just wanted to mention that I met a nice young man who's a big fan of the show down in Dalton. I just wanted to let him know that I appreciated what he come up and talk to me, and that keep watching, and we're happy to have you watch.
Thank you.
You weren't there, Ken. I asked how many the people watched the program, and I think it was a majority raised their hands. I was very impressed. It makes me feel better about doing the program. I guess, when we're on the program, the people watching don't realize this. We just see each other. And it's just kind of like 4 guys sitting around who, don't really get along, just doing their best to push through it and don't like each other that much. And so it felt good to see, I think it was a majority of the hands in the room went up. So we are doing something right here, and so God is blessing us.
Father, just for those who may comment, I'm not saying Truman was not a great president and didn't grow into the job and prove FDR wrong. I'm just saying that's how FDR chose the man, and I think God put a man in there that would do what he wanted to start the nation of Israel, because God is ultimately in control. I wasn't putting Truman down. I'm saying that's how FDR saw it when he did it. I guess that was 1944, 45, whatever it was. Um, um, one more thing. Ken, Esther, you were telling me something that you heard about the third temple that I'd never heard. Could you repeat that again for us, Ken?
No, I was talking with Ken earlier, and I was telling him that when I was researching this, that I just Googled the third temple, and it was Israelis 365, I think, is the news outlet in Israel that was talking about Trump, which I found interesting because it reminded me of Ken and David and them talking about this before, is that Trump was going to be instrumental in building the third temple. And I just found it real interesting to see that, because that's in a way, the way Trump does things. You think about how long it took him to build a wall. Once he got funded, 850 miles of wall. A temple can be built pretty quick. So, and by Trump standards. And so you might want to kind of keep your eye on that if that does come to fruition.
So in other words, there are people in television in Israel that think Trump might yet build the third temple.
I'm not sure if that's a television outlet or not. I don't know. I think that's a news outlet. Not positive of that. I just read the article. I read several different articles, but that one, I was trying to find the ones that was actually Israeli news outlets, as opposed to, just some of the other ones. Because you got to go through. You got to be careful when you Google stuff like that, because there's a lot of different things out there that people are saying about the third temple and some of the prophecies in the Bibles. And we can all see the prophets, but they're trying to make prophecy on top of prophecy, and they're trying to be prophets themselves just to gain a following, I guess. Yeah. So you have to be careful with people like that. So I was very careful in making sure I was trying to stick with the Israeli news, and that's where that came from, I think.
Hey.
But even if that's just speculation by the Israeli media, it still means the issue is out there.
Well, there's been speculation for there's been speculation for the last year on one media outlet that continually speculates about everything and never really reports the news. But the people have decided that is the news of the day, and it's supposed to be a news outlet. But I promise you, all I see on it is lies. I won't even dignify them with a name.
I did hear this on the some YouTube. I think it was Channel 7, Jerusalem. Or maybe it was Amir. That's a Jewish Messianic Jew who does prophetic news. He lives in Galilee area. He said the Sanhedrin a year and a half ago had made a coin, putting Cyrus on one side and Trump on the others. As we'll get into, Cyrus is the guy that authorized the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the Second Temple. Now, just because, and obviously the Sanhedrin is among religious Jews, they don't run the nation. The fact that they think that doesn't mean it's going to happen. But we're not the only ones speculating this way. That's kind of what we're saying. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and we're not, but there's a lot of people out there right now, especially in this day and times. And again, folks, you have to be careful about what they're looking into and where they're getting their news from. So when I Google something, I don't take the first article a lot of times and look at that, or some of the other ones, which I know are people that are trying to gain a following or be a prophet, I guess. I'm not sure. But I don't need a prophet to tell me what this Bible reads, because the prophets have already lived in the Bible. All I need to do is read the Bible for what it says. I don't even need anybody to interpret it for me, and nor does anybody else if they read the Bible.
Yeah, we will see what happens. Remember, Trump is a builder, and that kind of figured into it, as you say. Let's go to Nehemiah 6. As we get the minor prophets talk about this and others, and I just want to, and Nehemiah, well, Ezra and Nehemiah were one was the political leader, and the other was spiritual leaders, in the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the temple.
A secret informer, and he said, "They are coming to kill ungodly you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you." And I said, "Should such a man as I flee? And who is there such as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in.
Now, it's a long, involved story regarding the rebuilding of the Second Temple, and a lot of ups and downs. And I'm going to give you a simple version of it. Obviously, you can read all Ezra and Nehemiah and the minor prophets and other scriptures to get more details. But basically, Cyrus, who was named 100 years by name in advance by Isaiah, said and with no reason to do it, he said to the Jewish people, because he liked his cupbearer Nehemiah, go rebuild the city and the temple. They started both. And then in the middle of rebuilding the temple, the Arabs and some other neighbors came by force and intimidated them to stop building it. Also, they used lies that the Jews are going to rebel against the emperor, and about political intrigue. And for a while, the Jews stopped building it, and then other minor prophets came along and said, you're not being blessed because you're not doing it. Don't worry about the political intrigue and your neighbors, do it. And they did it. God backed them up, and I guess the rest is history. But Nehemiah was such a brave guy, in spite of many threats to his life, intimidation. He said, should a man such as I, didn't that sound sort of like John Wayne and whoever you think of as heroic, should a man such as I run and hide? And that's why I say you need strong, determined leaders. By the way, also against Nehemiah and some of the others were some of the nobles among the Jewish people and some of the rich people. In other words, Israel was quite divided, even in those days. Does that sound familiar? According, they have 14 political parties who've divided up the legislature. That's one reason they can't form a majority. Think about that. 14 political parties, some with only a few seats, but we're going to have it our way or nobody gets a majority. That's political.
Bad news.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it was not like smooth sailing. Everybody approved him. It was a lot of infighting, but they still got the job done. Let's look at Zechariah 4. This is an interesting scripture. The minor prophets talked about all this, and I want to just throw this one thing in.
So he answered and said to me, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. And he shall bring forth the capstone with shouts of grace, grace to it. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this temple. His hand shall also finish it.
Yeah. I get out of that scripture, it might appear that it's a political decision, and I'm not saying it isn't. But it really is a spiritual thing. Isn't that really what he's saying? And that makes our prayers more important than we think they are. What do you think, Ken, Esther?
Yes, it's one of those situations where you wonder why people don't get answered prayers, even in the church a lot of times, because are they in the right spirit when they're asking the prayer? Are they looking, what was it? I heard somebody, I think it was Gardner Ted, talking about the me prayer, where people are always praying for me, and forget about everybody else. And that's not being in the true spirit. You tend to pray for the others first before you ask for anything yourself, and, other than forgive you. So, when you pray, and you're talking with God one-on-one is through Christ, but you're also I think God wants you to be humble enough to be thinking of others before you think of yourself.
Any thoughts, Dave?
Well, he's absolutely right. Prayer has to come from the right spirit, but it's also got to be thought about. Don't just go, please give me the lottery. I really want the lottery. Thank you. I mean, we've got to think about, others. And people come to me and ask me to pray for them. And Sandy and I have a big list, and we try to name a lot of people by name, especially when they're, really getting up in age or they have a real health issue, so we try to do that. But it's also not wrong to ask God for the biggest thing I try to do consistently is to give me discernment. Help me to know right from wrong. Help me know when somebody's lying to me. Help me to have the right answer when somebody asks a question so that I can genuinely help them. So for me, discernment, not only in the word, but in life, help to figure out what's coming at me so I understand, so that I can give a loving answer to somebody, because I'm like anybody else. Ask me the wrong question at the right time and I might snap at you or something, and that's not helpful either. So I think, though, that back to, am I such a man as I would retreat or run, or however that was said. I don't think most of us in our group have that mentality, of that runaway mentality. I know people in other groups, I see that in them a little bit. And this whole thing with the COVID, when, high percentages of people don't go to services because they're afraid that they might catch a cold, kind of takes me back a little bit. Ken Esters was at the feast in Myrtle Beach, was overwhelmed. He was shocked at how few people showed up that he expected to be there because they were afraid of catching a cold. But the important thing is the important people did go. The ones who said, I'll go. There was a man there that's got to be 300 years old. He knows what everybody's shoes look like in the room. And he was there. He was there. And that man is such an inspiration. And you got a guy 25 years old. I'm not going to catch cold. Come on. Where's your faith? Yeah, I saw a thing on Facebook. I guess Thailand, they had flooding, and they're carrying their statues, trying to keep them out of the water. But their gods can't swim, apparently. They had to go rescue their god.
Yeah. It does make a point. Especially if you're young, middle-aged, like 45, and you're healthy, and you're running around scared spitless of COVID, no faith. That's a bit. I realize anybody could die of anything. You could die of a cold and whatever, but the odds of your dying of COVID are really small. You shouldn't be that terrorized.
When I talk to people about it, more and more people bring this up. They want to talk about this subject, and I ask them, "Where's the lines? Have you ever seen a line of people outside of a emergency room? Have you ever seen overwhelmed and overloaded hospitals? Have you seen bodies stacked to the ceiling from, the massive amounts of death? None of this is happening. People are not walking down the sidewalk and dropping over dead from COVID. None of this is happening. But in their mind, it's happening. It's not really happening, but it's happening in their mind. It's that bad. But they've got us convinced it's that bad. But none of that's.
My question is,
go ahead, Dave.
Where are the disposal bins for these masks that are so infected because they've been filtering this COVID? They've got to have disposal bins.
No, somewhere. They're all over the ground. Yeah, it's called the ground.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I hear that a lot of them are washing away into the ocean, and they got sea turtles with COVID masks on dying in the ocean. That's what somebody
Esters, I would not be laughing right now. You make me laugh.
Oh, sorry, that was funny.
There's a guy around the corner who has 2 deer statues in his front yard, and they both have masks on.
It shows you the power of propaganda in the media. You realize that power of propaganda in the media will be unleashed on the world someday by the beast and the false prophet. And people are proving a lot more easy to panic than we thought.
One of the things this taught me was that Americans are weak. When this whole thing started back in January of 2020, I was in communication with a guy from Wuhan. He lived there. He was married to a Chinese woman, and he was from England. And he was talking about all the stuff they're doing there. And I said, buddy, this is never going to happen in America. Americans won't put up for this. They won't go for this. All this masking and staying in their houses is never going to happen here. I was dead wrong. And it scares me to death how easily they were sucked in, and how easily we did a similar things that they did in China. I never thought in a million years we would have put up with it, but we did. And the fact that we went for that means we'll go for a whole lot of things. Imagine if the scare is real. I mean, not that this isn't a real disease, but let's say it's really bad, and people are dropping over in the street. They're just going to completely be able to take over our lives, give nothing. If they can there was a woman on, I forget what news program, says if we don't do something, people are just going to start enjoying their liberties without getting the vaccine. In other words, they need a stick in order to get us to take the vaccine. In other words, don't give their liberties back until they take the vaccine. She was on some news program, CNN, I don't know which one. But what she was saying was, we can't just let people go back to their normal lives because there's no threat. We got to make sure they take the vaccine before they get their liberties back. If they can give them to you, they can take them away. According to the Constitution, they can't take them from you because they don't come from them, they come from God. Well, the narrative is changing, and the fact that they're even talking about this in public and they're fine with it, that's the scariest thing is what they're doing to us because of this virus, not the virus. It's what they're doing to us because of it. Never let an opportunity go to waste. Never let a disaster or whatever what's his name, Rahm Emanuel said, or never let one of these go to waste. And they're not. They're using it to the most nth degree, and they're just destroying our liberty.
In other words, people can't be free and happy unless the government permits it.
Exactly.
You can't let them do this on their own.
Has she read the Constitution? Did her professors in college even tell her there's a Constitution? Has she no clue? Or does she just...
And the thing is, based on Zechariah 4, it's a spiritual battle, not just a political battle. I know we can't see the spiritual side of it, but it's a spiritual battle. And like you say, America is losing it at the moment. We're not only are we not as spiritual, but we're not as brave as we thought we were.
No.
Okay. Scenario 2, and this is one that you'll hear a lot. A great crisis precipitates the building of the third temple. This says Israel has to go through either great military scare, economic scare, or it could be a biochemical, but something bad, economy collapses, that will force the Jewish people to say, we need God. I mean, not just the very, very religious ones, and we need to build that third temple. And then they build the third temple. Let's go to Haggai 1:9.
You looked for much, but indeed it came too little. And when you brought it home, I blew it away. Why? Says the Lord of hosts, because of my house that it is in ruins, while every one of you runs to his own house.
Now, it could be at this point the foundation of part of the temple was built, but they stopped it. And God could consider that lying in ruins. They didn't finish it. So God gave them an economic crisis to wake them up. Is it possible something like that? And here's the point I would make. The way the Jewish people and American people are too, in today's world, it would take a pretty good crisis to motivate them to build the third temple. Don't you agree, Dave? That it would take a strong crisis to push them that far?
or a strong fake crisis. Perception is everything. Primo Carnera, turn of the century, almost 7 foot tall boxer. He'd walk out there and just clobber people. And one day, it may have been Marciano, I don't know. One day, this guy just leaned up and hit him on the chin, and he went down. And after that, everybody hit him in the chin, and he went down. Perception is everything. If people believe that something bad is going to happen, they'll fall for anything.
Yeah, that's true. Either perception or reality or a combination thereof. Maybe something bad and the media pumps it up.
You know, it just occurred to me. What if it's not a disaster that causes Israel to build the third temple? Satan needs the temple, right?
Eventually, yes.
So what if it's just a weak leader that maybe the king of the north works with Israel? He wants Israel to build the temple. What if they support Israel building it? What if after they come in and take over the king of the south and push him out, they're all for building a third temple in Europe, so they can go in and they can defile it?
That's as good a theory as I've ever heard. It really is. That we have to identify the great harlot that rides the beast. I'm not going to mention the vice president, but we need to identify the great harlot who rides the beast. And when you see that and you see all of these things cumulative, that's when you start having the right ideas.
By the way, scenario 2 and 3 could work together. I mean, as a possibility. Let's go to scenario 3. Scenario 3 is the beast of the Roman Empire will promote the temple. Now, here's what we believe. The future king of the Holy Roman Empire, because when you look at Daniel and the 4 beasts, there's a long leg, which assumes a long existence. Europe has been fascinated with the Holy Roman Empire for many, many centuries, up until the time of Napoleon, and I think he fulfilled the role to some extent. But after that, or say that period and back, a big chunk of Middle Europe was called the Holy Roman Empire. Now, Britain kind of stole the thunder of power after the Spanish Armada was defeated, because the King of Spain at one time was also King of the Holy Roman Empire. But the point is, up until that point, they were a big deal in Europe, a lot of power. And so Europe has always still been fascinated with the Roman Empire. Remember it says in Revelation, the beast that was, that wasn't, and yet is. In other words, he isn't, but he's behind the scenes. He's still in their mind. Well, when Europe does finally unite, at least Central Europe, behind 10 kings, and the Holy Roman Empire is declared, the dictator will have enormous military power, and he will promote the temple, just like you said, Ken, because he's thinking about his ultimate goal. Now, I heard one person talking about the beast. They said, what if this great military power becomes a great peacemaker in the world? Nobel Peace Prizes. And he quiets down a lot of the wars in the world. And based on his iron will and great military power and unity in Europe, he's seen as almost a new Messiah. Well, I call it false Messiah. And everybody, oh, he's a great man. And to back him up is a super pope. That's my title. But he'll be, Book of Revelation talks about the two of them. He'll be a great religious leader. The super pope. He'll have more, I'm assuming, charisma, religious pull than the average papacy has had. And this guy will unite just about all churches in support of the beast. Think about it. That would include probably a lot of Latin America, Europe, and other parts of the Western world would all be, maybe even Eastern Orthodox to some extent, would even support this guy. That's a lot of power and charisma. And then he'll lean on the Jewish state to either build the temple or finish it. Let's say they started it and stopped it, to lean on them to finish the temple. It would fit, wouldn't it?
Well, if you can imagine the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, the Church of England, Rome, all of them working together.
Well, bear this in mind that I just read an article 2 days ago. Somebody from the Vatican was talking about how they've lost billions of dollars over the last year. Billions of dollars because of lack of attendance and lack of tithing and so forth. So they're going to have to turn to somebody to help keep their thing going. So there you go. You got a willing partner there. Now you just come up with your charismatic person as a leader of the 10 tribes or the 10 nations or kings of the Bible. You got those leaders. You can actually have, like David was talking about, all these church groups pull together and support that leader. And then you've got your place, and the third temple's already being built or almost finished at that point in time. So it could happen that way as well.
Let me ask you, Ken, do you think it's possible, the Ken in Atlanta, do you think it's possible that even churches like Southern Baptist, Methodist, mainline Protestant churches who basically protested papal authority may go along with this new guy?
Dr. Ricks, unfortunately, I believe the Bible tells me that even churches of God are going to go along with it. I think even people that are Church of God are going to go along with it.
I'm going to say,
but some,
they're not the very elect, but I think that's what it's telling me in the Bible. I'm not positive of that, but I think that's what that's telling me.
Well, one thing I can see where former Worldwide Church of God, what's left of them, would go for it. But I wonder about some of the other groups might do it too. I'm not, but you could be right. A lot of people who ought to know better will be deluded. Dave?
They will, because it's the same religion. The Baptist is the same as the Lutheran, the same as the Episcopalian, the same as the Pentecostals. So when they come out and they say, hey, we're all the same religion, we'll let you guys marry if you want to. We'll let you guys marry guys. And, they're all going to go, wow, this is wonderful. Everything's good. Look at all the peace. Look at all the prosperity. Everybody's fat. Why not? Why not? We saw him draw down lightning from heaven. We saw him heal people, resurrect people, whatever. It's got to be him.
Yeah. And by the way, I think it'll be a deceptive piece of prosperity. It's sort of like, you all probably know this, that many of the products made in China that we buy here at inexpensive prices, relatively speaking, and corporations make big money, is made with semi-slave labor in China. Well, the book of Revelation implies that they will use something like that in Babylon the Great, in their great economy that everybody loves so much. Those behind the scenes, closed doors that most people will not hear about or don't want to think about. In certain parts of the world, they'll use maybe child labor, semi-slave labor, prison labor, and I mean concentration camp type prison labor, I mean kind type stuff, to create this false prosperity.
Like
Uyghurs. And they have other concentration camps in China and North Korea. The world just doesn't know about it because they don't want to know about it.
Well, Christians too. Christians are not well thought of in.
No. And I've heard stories of when certain Christians get caught, they call them unauthorized churches. I think the Communist Party has to have major leaders in all the Christian churches, and they approve of their sermons. Any church that doesn't cooperate is unauthorized. And if they catch them, they can, if they choose to, send them to concentration camps.
And I believe they have to have the leader, Chi Ping or Chai, whatever, Chai Rodriguez, whatever the guy's name is. His picture's got to be higher than Christ's in the church.
I was told also the Vatican made a deal in China. Now this could change, where the top church officials are appointed by the Communist Party. and some I've even seen, at least I've read, that some Catholics complained about that, but that's the deal the Vatican made with the communist Chinese so that Catholicism could be an approved church in communist China. That's the kind of stuff that may go on in the world tomorrow. Um, Churches are approved by the government. They're not really preaching the Bible, they're preaching a man or whatever he wants preached.
Up in Canada, they tried to shut down apparently they were keeping Passover. It was the last day of unleavened bread, and the pastor had an accent of some kind, but he was yelling at the police officials, "I'm not listening to you. Get out, you Nazis. You
Oh
disgust."
yeah,
Did you see that video?
that was
Yeah, I love him.
I heard somebody say that, when Kissinger made the original deal, we'd open China. The thought was if we let China into free trade, China realized communism didn't work economically, that capitalism would change China. But what seems to have happened over all these years is instead of China becoming more like America, America is becoming more like communist China. And they're buying our politicians. You'd be surprised the stories that I've heard on the radio. Not just Eric Swalwell either, some others you'd be shocked at.
Hunter Biden. Do you see the newest thing on him? I mean, every couple weeks something pops up off that laptop.
I might have a laptop. I might have lost a laptop. I don't know. There could be a laptop. Maybe I dropped it off. Maybe somebody hacked it. The Russians, I think they might have done it. Who knows? There could be a laptop.
And the reporter is so friendly to him. It's like, we're just chatting over friendly ice cream and coffee, right?
And not one follow-up question like, hey, is this your signature on the slip where you signed it saying this is my laptop?
Don't you feel responsible for the things you've done to sell America's leaders for foreign policy for money? Oh, no.
No, not
Nobody
one
asks
question
that
about the
question.
gun he left in the garbage can outside the school. Nothing.
Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 2. This is what we think the third scenario will happen when the beast, we believe for years the third temple will be running smoothly. And then 2 Thessalonians 2.
Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
And remember, a falling away is coming first. Like you said, Ken, it will include some in the churches of God as well as mainstream churchianity will fall away because Bible IQ is probably going down in the world, right?
It's absolutely correct. I mean, we've all seen it in our groups. We know what's going on, and some of the other churches Dave mentioned earlier. If I'm not mistaken, some of the churches of God didn't even keep the Feast of Tabernacles this year.
Yeah, a number of them
That's-
canceled because of COVID.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
I won't name names because I could be wrong, but a lot of them that you would know the groups if I mentioned them. And so this false Messiah will come along. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 2, 6-9. This just kind of adds a little more to the story.
And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders.
People wonder, how did Hitler have so much success early on? The devil was behind him. How will this beast and the false prophet have so much success? The devil will behind him, and God will let him. God could block it. And the way this scripture is written, It's like God has a block on Satan can't pull off his final scheme till God removes the block or a brick that's slowing you down. But at some point, probably when that second temple is running smoothly, God will remove the last restraint on Satan and he'll be able to do his final thing and desecrate the temple and then the world which thought it had peace, peace, will find suddenly war, war. Um, and so we have to be sure that we don't get deceived. I would say to anybody, the day you see a third temple being desecrated, that's the time to start thinking about maybe places of safety or at least realizing the end is coming soon and, and up your spiritual game. But a lot of people in the world, I believe, will fall for, oh, those Jewish people, what do they know? This guy really is the new Messiah. He is God. What's wrong with worshiping this man? I know when you say that out loud, you can't think of good old Southern Baptists or good old Methodists believing that, but I believe it will, and some nice Catholics and Lutherans, I believe it will happen.
You know, you said something key there about spiritual game. You know, people that follow this, they want to put away food, they want to buy guns, they want to stock this and buy gold, silver. More important than all of that stuff combined is your spiritual game and your faith. Because you can have all the gold in the world, it's not going to do you any good if your faith is not there. And that's where I think 90% of our effort should be put. Good, it's good to have food stock. You should have that anyway, just in case COVID hits, or we get, if there's a earthquake where you live or some bad. It's nice to be prepared for things like that, and you should be. But if you can't, you gotta get spiritually set. Look how many people did not go to the feast because of COVID, even in our groups, because they weren't spiritually set for it. They were worried about the food and the toilet paper and this, that, and the other thing. But if they would have been there spiritually, they would have been at feast. And I think that's what we got to think of. And that was a good point.
Very good point, Ken. Very good point. Um, let's look at 2 Thessalonians 2:2.
Now, brethren, concerning the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, we ask you not to soon be shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come.
One thing is, don't let the media shake you up and get you overly frightened. And by the way, I will guarantee you Christ will not come tonight because too many prophecies have not been fulfilled. And that's really what Paul is saying in his own way, because he goes on to talk about the man of sin who's got to desecrate the temple, which hadn't happened when Paul wrote this letter. So Paul is saying, don't let people get you all rattled. Lose your courage. Fear not.
Right. I always look for the two prophecies. Look for the two main prophecies that I was always taught to look for, and that's Jerusalem, not Israel, but Jerusalem, the city-state, the city being surrounded by armies, and the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel that we read earlier. Those two things are, to me, when I know that, hey, what's about to happen is about 3.5 years away.
Good point. By the way, we wonder, how could a big European army get close enough to Jerusalem to close in so the people have to get out with less than one day's warning? Well, one way is the beast will tell the nation of Israel, we'll protect you from any of your neighbors who try to stop you from building the temple. We'll bring our peacekeeping international force in to protect you. And if America's military power has declined, where else will the world look?
Right.
So Israel said, well, we got to look to somebody. America's gone. So and that European power will probably protect them for several years, and all will look like it's worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So
You know,
God gives the signal.
people keep thinking that China's going to be the power. China ain't going to be the power. China's not going to, because they're not mentioned.
Well,
any more
China's
than
the
we-
tidings to the east to me.
Yeah, yeah. They're the Eastern power, but they're not the Jerusalem.
They're not.
Wow.
Well, right now they're big. They're a big power, but they're not going to be a world controlling power.
No.
Everybody thinks that's what's going to happen. Not us, but regular people in the world think that China's going to be the next big power. No.
Well, it hadn't been that long ago. They thought everybody thought Russia was going to be that. So
Yep, and look at them. They're pretty much.
yeah.
By the way, I heard someone theorize this. I know we're about out of time, but I do want to say this before we finish. We could probably pass over Isaiah 45, 13 and 14. I want to mention this. That's about Cyrus did it for no price. But they say America's military is being, I don't think the exact word I want to use here. They're politically getting rid of conservatives in the military, and I don't mean this as an anti-woman thing. They're feminizing our military.
We're going to look like the French did in 1930.
And they will basically weaken our military. There's more we could say about it. 4 or 5 or 6 years of this, and a lot of the tough warriors either will leave the military, be kicked out of the military, or no longer want to join the military. And our military will decline, and the world will see it. Well, if that's the case, and China and Russia and maybe Iran are looking more belligerent, what's the logical thing for Europe to do? Arm itself to the teeth to protect itself.
Right, because if we can't do it,
And that is one of the reasons that the beast power will rise in Europe, because America's hegemony and safety net in the world will no longer be what it should be. And I realize that, people say, well, that's hard to believe that 5 or 6 years of a liberal administration can degrade the U.S. military. Well, we'll just wait and see. Let's call our last scripture, Daniel 12, please, if we can.
and from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days.
Now, let's admit the obvious. Nobody knows the day or hour when Christ will return. We can sort of feel when it's getting closer and speculate about it, but we should remain humble. And I do think there will be some surprises between now and the return of Christ. Obviously, if you knew what the surprises were, they wouldn't be a surprise. But keep watching world events. It'll help us fight spiritual apathy. And maybe we will be ready and aware when these events happen where others will be caught off guard.
Right.
Well, thank you, everybody, for participating in this evening's podcast. Thank you, Ken, Dave, and Kenneth.
All right. Thank
Yep.
you.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's good to be back after a couple of weeks off. And we'll see you all back again next week. So good night.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.